Hello and welcome to revision tips for CIPS Level 3, Advanced Certificate in Procurement and Supply Operations. We're looking at Module 1, Procurement and Supply Environments, and Learning Outcome 4, which is to understand procedures that regulate procurement and supply. So we're going to look at the documentation used in procurement and how documented policies and procedures are used. Before we look at the types of documents that support procurement and supply, let's look at the operational cycle. So procurement goes through three stages operationally. The need, order, deliver, which I remember as NOD, like nod your head, N-O-D. The need phase looks at identifying the requirements, specifying what you need, raising requisitions and authorising the need. Then you move into the order phase, which is to research the supplier and choose them, establish the price and terms and place the order. And then the delivery phase is to receive and inspect the delivery, approve and pay the invoices, and update your records. Do remember this as NOD, N-O-D. So a purchase requisition is used to inform procurement when an item is needed. It has to be authorised by someone who is accountable for the budget. A purchase order is sent to a supplier so that the items can be produced and the need is satisfied. Items are paid for once received, not at the point of ordering, unless of course you're doing an Amazon type immediate payment. But it creates a legally binding contract once the supplier accepts it, and it tells the warehouse staff what to expect. A delivery note is sent with the delivery of the goods, and it lists the quantity of each item. It should only be signed for when the delivery has been checked. What comes next is an invoice, which is typically sent to the supplier once the goods have been delivered. The finance team checks the invoice against the purchase order and the delivery note to ensure that it all contains the same information before processing the invoice. If a purchase order, a delivery note, and an invoice all match up, this is known as three-way matching. So here you can see the process for invoice clearance and payment. It starts with the supplier delivering the goods or performing the service. Off to the left, it checks to see whether the goods have been received and that they're okay. If they are, then a goods received note goes to finance. If it isn't, procurement then resolve the issue. But on the other side, the the supplier will send the invoice, which goes into finance. You can see two things going into finance that need to match up. They check the invoice against the goods received note and the purchase order, and if it's correct, goes straight down for payment. If it's not correct, probably comes back to procurement to resolve the issue with the supplier before they agree the payment. And finally, they update the records. We're going to look at some of the other documents you might see in procurement. The first one is an RFI, request for information. This is used to gather information about a supplier and their capabilities prior to a formal procurement process. An RFQ is a request for quote. It invites suppliers to quote for a specific item with a very clear specification. Whereas an RFP would be used to canvass potential solutions from the supplier where the specification is unclear. So the RFP is a request for proposal. You get the quote, but you also get a solution with it rather than telling them exactly what product you want to buy. A PQQ or pre-qualification questionnaire is a document that looks for information about a bidder's suitability. So it's about the bidder, not the bid. An invitation to tender, ITT, is a document that suppliers respond to with a bid on a large, complex or outsourced procurement. A bill of materials, or BOM, is a complete list of materials and components that are required in order to manufacture something, including the quantities. And a specification, there are various types, usually conformance or performance. Conformance is technical, usually used on goods, or performance, which is outcome focused, more commonly seen in services. We now look at the responsibilities of procurement, which will depend on the size of an organisation and how procurement fits into the structure. In a small organisation, procurement could be shared amongst a number of people, as the spend budget won't warrant a large team. But in large organisations, a department of procurement specialists is needed, not only to make savings, but also to manage supply chain risks. So on the top left, you can see where procurement is viewed as strategic. Procurement director sits head to head with other directors, and others report into a director, as in the bottom right hand side, and it's seen as a non-strategic function or an operational function. But the procurement team's responsibilities are for providing strategic direction to the organisation. They need to collect information about what we've bought, where we've bought it from, how much we paid. To manage categories, understanding the unique characteristics of certain things that could possibly be purchased together. To manage contracts to ensure that you're getting what you thought you were going to get when you procured that contract in the first place. Working with suppliers to build relationships, and finally to ensure rules and regulations are completed and followed. With those rules and regulations comes a form of delegation, and that means the assignment of a responsibility or authority to another person. Michael Hyatt identified 5 levels of delegated authority. Level 1 is do exactly as I tell you, do not deviate. Level 2, go and research the topic, report back to me, I will make the decision. Level 3, research the topic, outline the options and make me a recommendation. Level 4, make a decision, report back. Level 5, make whatever decision you think is best, you don't need to report back to me. So have a think about the sorts of delegation authority you work within. But continuing on from the responsibilities of procurement, we have responsibilities for different stages in the sourcing process. And what you can see on the screen now is A.T. Kearney's 7-step sourcing process, which is often used for category management. So have a think about what procurement responsibilities are at each of these stages. And you could create a RACI matrix. I introduced you to that in a previous session. RACI is looking at who's responsible, who's accountable, who do you need to consult with, and who do you need to inform. This will help you to allocate the responsibility to each department for these particular areas. But also ultimately it comes down to sort of profiling the category, grouping things together that are meaningful and similar, selecting the right sourcing strategy, whether that be to source locally, globally, internationally, dual source, multi-source, single source. Generate that supplier portfolio of possible suppliers and then select your implementation path, whether that be an invitation to tender, an RFQ, or a negotiation of some description. Then you go off and select your supplier, integrate them into your business and benchmark them at the very final stage. And the final slide we're going to look at today is corporate governance, which is, you see this more in sort of local government, central government type organisations. And governance means having a way to ensure that there is an appropriate level of control and probity in the management of its procurement activities. Here we're looking at a gated process, which is used as a project management technique in which a project is divided into meaningful phases with checks and evaluation at the end of each phase. Essentially, the project can't continue unless a gate is passed. So gate 1 looks at the opportunity. You need to basically produce a document that outlines the problem that you're trying to solve. Stage 2 would go into a business case. Is there a business case for this? What are the benefits? What are the resources? What are the issues? What are the risks? If it goes to gate 3, then you look at your commercial case. So there's a commercial strategy that comes out of this that looks at your preferred options, your fallback options, your commercial options. Moving on to gate 4, we look at the strong delivery route, and you should end up with a procurement strategy which looks at things like what procurement route you plan to take, what your documents might look like, your contract, your KPIs, and how you intend to manage that contract. Once all the bids are back, you then move into gate 5, which is, should we award the contract? You know, have you actually got the benefits you set out to get in the first place? and the ultimate output to this is a contract. But that's the end of Learning Outcome 4. Thank you for watching.